What would you be willing to do to not need love, but rather to be love? What would you be willing to do not to have to be healthy, but to be what health is? What would you be willing? See, that's the real question. You know, once you realize the answer to who am I, which is at the same time the easiest thing to answer and the hardest thing to answer at the very same time. Because you already are what you are, and it's so obvious, it's hidden in obviousness, it's hidden in plain sight. And so when you see it and when you get it, the question's been answered. You can't answer it, but the question's been answered. Then the next question is, because once that question's answered and you're having that experience, which you have always been having, right? And so one of the ways you can tell somebody got the question answered is when they experience the answer to the question, they realize that this has always been true. The answer is, oh, I've always been this, right? So that's one of the things that allows you to see that it's true. Not only is who I am, but I've always been this. No matter what I thought I was, I've always been this. And then the next question is, however, the way it seems to be continues. I know who I am, and I'm still experiencing being a person, having a body, having circumstances, feeling good, feeling bad, right? Being challenged by life, waking up in the morning and listening to the weather report and they say it's a dreary day and you still believe it, right? So then what? Right? Because the reality of it is to wake up and know who you are is only the beginning. It's the beginning of undoing what your brain believes. It's the beginning of deprogramming the program that runs that you consider to be you. It's the beginning of that. And that is not going to happen in a split second. The thing that will empower you and motivate you and inspire you to deal with it in an effective way is the recognition of the truth, right? That becomes your source. And because that's your source, and because that source is infinite, and because that source has infinite intelligence, that's what you can bring to bear on the challenging process of undoing what got done that had you be left with this limited version of yourself. And fortunately, we live in a time and there are methods available to us that were never available before. Now that we have brain science and we understand more about this, you're in a better position than any human being that ever lived to wake up and experience the truth of who you are. You are in the best position that more than any human being that ever lived to wake up and experience the truth of who you are in terms of what's available to you to do that. Yeah. And for whatever reason, I mean, either because there's more people that on the planet than there ever was, or it's because there's more suffering on the planet than there ever was. There are more people who are awake than there ever was, and so that makes a difference as well. You know that it's not such an esoteric thing anymore. I mean, one of the things that I think would be very valuable is for people who understand these things to try and make these things as ordinary as possible and get out of the magic, get out of them, stop making it so sacred, stop making it religious. Because it's not sacred, it's not religious, it's ordinary. It's the truth. The truth is as ordinary as anything can be. There's nothing sacred about it. And the sacredness that people have attributed to it in previous times and the magic or the mysticism of it has turned it into something that seems, unobtainable. When in reality, I attribute that to the fact that in previous times when people had less of an understanding of reality, they saw it that way. They saw it as, some kind of spiritual, mystical reality, when in fact, there's nothing more common, there's nothing more obvious, there's nothing more available than the truth. It's more available than anything else. It's so available that the mind can't comprehend it, right? The mind wants it to be something that can be conceptualized, right? The mind needs it in that form in order to be able to get it, right? But it's more available than that. It's more obvious than something that you can conceive. It's inconceivable. And its inconceivableness is its obviousness, not its mysteriousness. Write that down. Its inconceivableness is its obviousness, not its mysteriousness. It's so obvious that it's inconceivable. The space in this room might be the last thing you noticed if I asked you what's here. At the same time, it's the most obvious thing in this room, is it not? So the same thing is true. And so one of the things that I am interested in is encouraging you and inspiring you to not continue to not continue with the trance, not continue with just going along with the sleepwalk, but to understand the possibility and understand how available it is, and understand that if you get the truth, if you get the reality of what's available, that there is nothing more important in this life. But, you know, having said that, you see, here's the dilemma. Having said that, you know, you could agree with me, and you could say, well, you know, if that really is true, then how could I want anything more than this? And then even having seen that and said that to yourself, and you make up your mind, okay, that's it. You know, I'm committed to waking up. I'm committed to experiencing the truth, right? And then you walk out of here, right? And somebody bumps into you, and the voice in your head says, that jerk. And you're gone. You're gone. And then later in the day, somebody says to you, oh, you went to that class, right? What did you learn? Oh, I learned about awareness. I learned about meditation. I learned about that it's possible for all of us to wake up and actually realize heaven on earth. But I really don't have time to do that stuff. That's what'll set in. That's what'll set in, right? So you could be given the, it's like one of my teachers said, you could arrive at the gates of heaven and stop and say, oh, wait a minute, do you have a pamphlet that I could read before I go in here? You know, I just want to make sure. I know it seems elusive. It seems very elusive, doesn't it? What appears to be the case seems very much the case, doesn't it? What appears to be the case seems very much the case. But that doesn't mean it's true. It just seems true. It appears to be so. One of the things you have to do in order to wake up and experience the truth is to realize that an appearance is an appearance. It's appearing, it's not true, it's an appearance. And I don't care, you know, somebody who is in the desert and they're suffering from dehydration, you know, and they're desperate for water, right? If they see a mirage, it's real. They go to the mirage. And then they get there and find out there's nothing there. But it was real. That's the same thing about everything else. The appearances that appear are real. And not only are they real, but even when you're awake, it doesn't mean that you no longer deal with the appearance. You can be awake and be in the appearance, operating in the appearance, but always knowing it's an appearance. It's the same thing as the analogy that I give a lot of the time. You can be an actor in a play and really enjoy the drama of the play. And if you're a good actor, you can really forget a lot of what you know is actually true in order to be in the role and be in the play. And it's a wonderful experience to experience. It's like being somebody else, right? But all the time, the reason you can do this is because you know it's not true. That's the exact same thing. It's an appearance. They set the props up. You're given a script. You practice your lines, right? You might even meet somebody that's like the person you're playing so that you can study them, right? And then you become that for the time of the play. And if it's a drama where there's a lot of tragedy after the play's over, you're very relieved that it's just acting, right? Well, you know, the reality of it is, the truth of the matter is, you're already brainwashed. You're already brainwashed. How can I brainwash somebody that's brainwashed, right? This is about a rinse. This is the rinse and the spin dry, not the wash. Right. So that's one of the things that's necessary in order for you to deal with what needs to be dealt with. Is you first have to understand you're brainwashed. It's an improvement. You can be an improved brainwashed person, right? By adding to your programming that I am going to pay attention and notice when I'm reacting, and so I'll stop reacting and so forth. This is all good. There's nothing wrong with that at all, right? But that's a step in the right direction, right? But like you said, there's a difference between knowing it conceptually and applying it and using it psychologically to be a healthier psychological person, right? That's good, no problem. You will be better off by doing that, right? But that's only a step in the right direction. If you're going to go the whole way, you want to get to the point where this is the natural way you are. It's not something that you have to practice anymore. So that's going to take some work. It's going to take some specific dealing with, right? It's going to take some specific dealing with the tendency to that you have to live your life in your head, to be in a mental body, not in a not even in a physical body or an energetic body, but in a mental body. And so when you're living in a mental body, you're really not present, right? You're really not present. You're just thinking about being present. That's not present. That's thinking about being present. See, it's a real simple thing. What the book is giving you the opportunity to practice. It's giving you the opportunity to practice being present. It's that simple. And how it does that is it says, sit still, right? Sit still. Pay attention to your breath. Your breath is present. Your body's always in the moment. Your body is always present, and your breath is always present. So start to pay attention to your breath, and then breathe naturally. What that means is you don't hold your breath. Most human beings hold their breath. Most human beings only use 30% of their lungs or 20% of their lungs, and most human beings hold their breath. You breathe very shallow. And when you're upset, you hold your breath, right, to try and block the feelings, right? And so the practice is breathe consistently in and out through the nose, right? So the breath is present, and now you're paying attention. You have to pay attention to the breath to breathe consistently. In other words, after you breathe out, you breathe in. You don't hesitate, right? So you practice doing that. And then while you're doing that, the other part of the exercise is it says to, in your mind, say to yourself, as you're breathing, I am here now in this. And you say one of the words with the breath. I is one breath, M is another breath, here is another breath, and you just keep doing that. Now what you have is your body's not moving, you're paying attention to the breath that's in the present moment, you're breathing naturally, consistently, without holding your breath, you're breathing deeper so you're getting more oxygen, it's going to stimulate more energy in your body, and then you're focusing your attention on one phrase so your mind can't wander, right? And what happens is it brings you into the present. And when it brings you into the present, you actually experience that this is different than the way it normally is. It's more alive, it's more vibrant, it's more pleasurable, it's more awake. And so it gives you the opportunity to experience what would it be like for you to actually be here instead of thinking, or instead of being related to what appears to be going on out there. You do this with your eyes closed, right? And so if you do this 2 times a day, every day for 10 weeks, and you're also learning something along the way, and you're also practicing another statement that you repeat to yourself as you go through the day to keep your mind from wandering as much as it does, right? And as you're doing this, naturally what happens is the emotions that have been suppressed in your system begin to bubble up, right? Because they're not as suppressed anymore. And you become more available in the present moment to experience what's there. And what's there are these emotions that got stuff from early on in your life, and they start to come up. And one of the instructions for this practice is to allow whatever happens to happen. That's a very important part, right? It doesn't matter if you're doing it and you feel it's hard, that's okay. If you feel it's easy, that's okay. If you feel it's uncomfortable, that's okay. If you cry when you're doing it, that's okay. If you laugh when you're doing it, that's okay. Whatever happens, you allow to happen, right? And so the thing about this that I think is very valuable is you actually have an experience of what it's like to be present, and that starts to motivate you, and you have you have something real to relate to now. So that's what I was talking about. You know, you have, and this person was a person who was suffering from a chronic neurological disorder that caused a very intense physical pain. So he was highly motivated to find some way to get free from that. And through the things that he did to try and find an answer to his pain, he discovered a process and a pathway, and it worked for him to become free from his physical pain. And then he wrote about what he learned and what he learned to practice. And the reality of it is, what he says in this book is very consistent with many of the teachings and traditions that go back in time. He's just isolating it and bringing it into focus as something that's very ordinary. You notice there's no religion in it, there's no mysticism in it, you know, it's not even psychological. He's just saying, just do this. That's all, just do this. So you know, we are very fortunate to live at a time when you have these kinds of things available, and even with that being the case, very few people will take advantage of it, because as long as your mind is running the show, you stand no chance. You've got to understand to stop listening to the voice in your head, because there's no way to wake up as long as you identify with that voice. Okay. Have a good day.